Hey guys, it's Alexandra from iloveknots.com. Today I'm going to show you how to make a Suzette beanie. Suzette is comprised of single crochet, double crochet into the same stitch, and skipping the next one, and it creates a really beautiful texture. For my beanie, I'm going to be using Swish worsted weight yarn in Dove Heather. This yarn is 100% merino wool, but if you cannot use merino wool, Red Heart Soft is very similar. This is a lighter worsted weight yarn. If you can handle wool, but you don't have access to this, then Lion Brand Woolies is also very nice. I'm using an H8 5mm crochet hook. You're going to need whatever crochet hook you need to meet gauge. Gauge is very important so that this beanie fits. You're also going to need a soft tape measure so that you can measure your gauge. I'm going to be working this hat in a teen woman size, which fits a 22-inch head circumference. I'm going to have all the other sizes on my blog, iloveknots.com. To get started, we're going to begin with a slip knot. So I have the tail end over my fingers, wrap it around my index finger 2 times. Take the one that's behind on the left, pull it up over the other loop, but not off my finger. Then take the loop that's on the left now, pull it up over the other one and off my finger. Then I insert my crochet hook into the loop that's on my finger, and I hold the working yarn here and I pull the tail, and it closes that loop up just to normal tension. Suzette stitch has to be worked in a multiple of 2, so our numbers are even. We're going to begin the crown of our beanie by working a chain 4. To chain, we just yarn over the hook, pull through the loop. We don't count the loop that's on our hook. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth one, which is the first chain, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, pull through this loop and the loop that's on our hook. This is a slip stitch to form a ring. The hole that you see here is not the ring, it's actually right underneath that. This hole on the top keeps getting bigger because this is not a secured tail end, but just make sure you're not working into that one. We're going to start with a chain 2. In the crown, this does not count as a stitch. And then we're going to work 10 double crochets into the ring. To work a double crochet, I'm going to yarn over my hook. Then I'm going to insert into the ring. The ring is right there in the center, not this top hole, the center. Insert my hook right into the center, working over the ring. Yarn over, pull through. I have 3 loops on my hook. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. As I work this ring, I'm going to keep my beginning tail end right behind the stitches, and I want to crochet over that. So we'll work another double crochet, I'll show you. Yarn over, insert right into the center ring, and you have the chain right over top of your hook because you're crocheting over it. Yarn over, pull through, 3 loops. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And as we work, we're just going to keep our tail up against our chain and we're going to crochet over it so we can close up that hole easily. So this chain 2 does not count as a stitch here. We have 1, 2 double crochet. I want 10 double crochets in total. I have 10 double crochets. If you need help counting, you look at the top where it looks like a V. That's 1 stitch, 2, 3, 4, all the way around. And that's a good way to find out where the first stitch is if you're not sure, because you're going to be slip stitching here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Insert your hook under both loops of that stitch. Yarn over, pull through that stitch and the loop that's on your hook. You're going to slip stitch join at the end of each row. This beginning tail, we can now hold the fabric with our right hand and pull, and it'll close up that center ring. And we'll secure it later when we weave in our ends, but for now we're just going to leave it there. Round 1 is complete. We have 10 stitches. I'm going to show you how I work my crowns in my beanies so that my seam stays straight. And this is a non-traditional way. This is not how most bloggers do it. I have not seen it done this way before. But this will ensure that my seam remains straight, which will be less noticeable. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. Basically, or typically, you would work your increases as 2 stitches into the first stitch, and then let's say 1 stitch into the next, 2 into the next, 1 into the next. But I take that first increase, instead of working 2 stitches into this first one, I only work 1 stitch. And then after I work all the way around, I work the second stitch of it into the same stitch as the first. The first half, the first stitch, goes into it on the left of the beginning chain, and the last stitch goes into the first stitch but on the right side of the beginning chain. And I'm going to show you what I mean. We're going to start this round with a chain 2. Remember that in the increasing part, the chain 2 does not count as a stitch. We're going to double crochet into the first stitch. And again, typically you would work 2 stitches into this, but I am going to wait until I get all the way around and then work my last stitch into the first one on this side. Then we're going to work 2 stitches, 2 double crochets into the next stitch. And that is the repeat all the way across. It's 2 double crochets into each stitch. I always pretend there's already 2 stitches here because it makes it easier in my counting. 2, 4, 6. You work all the way around, working 2 double crochets into each stitch. At the end of the round, we're going to have 20 double crochets. And then once I get to the end over here, I'm going to show you how I work my last stitch. Alright, so I've been counting in my head as if this first stitch had 2, and now I have reached 20 stitches. But I actually only have 19 because I need to work the last stitch of this first increase. I'm going to yarn over my hook. Here's our first double crochet. I'm going to work into this stitch right here, which I say is the first stitch, the same as the first. Right here. If you worked into the exact stitch of the first, it would just cross over here. But I work right here into the join, which I consider the first stitch still because it's attached to the chain. So I'm going to insert my hook right in there, and it comes out right on the right side of the beginning chain 2, and then I complete my double crochet. And that is officially the 20th stitch. Insert my hook into the first stitch and slip stitch join. I hope that makes sense. I hope it gets easier as the rounds go on, but if you have any questions about my method, just leave me a comment below and I will try my best to answer that. For round 3, we're going to begin with a chain 2. The repeat for this one, before it was 2 stitches into each stitch around. Now we're going to do 2 stitches into 1 stitch, 1 stitch into the next, 2 stitches into the next stitch, 1 stitch into the next. I'm going to only work 1 double crochet into this first one, because I'm going to do the same exact thing as I did before, where I work the second half over here. So we're pretending this is 2 stitches, and then 1 stitch into the next. 2 double crochets into the next stitch, 1 double crochet into the next stitch, and continue working 2 double crochets into the next stitch, 1 double crochet into the next stitch. Once you get all the way around, you're going to have 30 stitches in this round in total. So I'm going to work my final stitch over here, and then I will work, not the final, because I have 1 more stitch to go right in the front, in the first stitch, that will complete this first increase. So that will also have 2 stitches, 1 stitch, 2 stitches, 1. So now I'm going to keep working around. Alright, so this row, I have just finished my last repeat. Now I'm going to work my very last stitch, which is the second half of this first increase. Remember, we work 1 stitch into the first, just to the left of the beginning chain, and the last stitch of that one goes into the same as the first, but it comes out just to the right of the beginning chain too. And then I slip stitch join to the first stitch. This is round 3, and round 3 has 30 double crochets. For round 4, we're going to chain 2. The repeat for round 4 is 2 double crochets into 1 stitch, double crochet into the next 2. So we're going to work our increase the same way as before. 1 double crochet into that first stitch, pretending there's 2. 1 double crochet into the next stitch, 1 double crochet into the next stitch. 2 double crochets into the next stitch. 1 double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. Continue working all the way around, 2 double crochets into the next stitch, 1 double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. And after you work your last stitch over here, we'll work the final stitch in the first stitch, and then we'll slip stitch join, and round 4 will have 40 double crochets. Alright, I've worked my last repeat. I'm going to work my last stitch into the first stitch. And now that completes round 4 with 40 double crochets. Slip stitch join to the first. I'm going to pull up this loop so I don't lose it, and I'm going to take my gauge now. I want to touch base on the front of this. If the front of your circle is like puffed up a little bit, it's okay. As long as you have the same number of stitches 40 double crochets at the end of round 4, 30 double crochets before that, 20 double crochets. As long as you're increasing as you're supposed to, you can finger press it and it lays flat, it's fine. You don't want it to sort of take this bowl shape. It's doing it now because I just formed it to do that, but you don't want it to regularly be doing this. You want it to be able to lay flat. If yours is cupping too much, it means that you may have missed a stitch, so I recommend counting using those V-stitches along the top. But we're going to take our gauge right now to make sure that we are on the correct path, so our finished hat comes out to the correct size. So I'm going to take my soft tape measure, and this should be about 3 3/4 inches. So to take gauge on a circle, we're measuring the diameter, which is the width directly across the center of the circle. So I put my ruler on the left side and measure all the way to the right side across the very center of the circle. And it says I have 3 3/4 inches, which is exactly what I want it to be. We're going to continue on to round 5, chain 2. The repeat for this is 2 double crochets into the first stitch, double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. So we'll begin with just 1 double crochet here, as we'll work the second one at the end. 1 double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. Double crochet, 2 double crochets into the next stitch. Double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. And that is what you will continue working all the way around. 2 double crochets into the next stitch, 2 double crochets into the next stitch, double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. At the end, over here, we'll work our very last stitch into the first, and we'll end round 5 with 50 double crochets. I've just worked the last stitch of my last repeat. I'm going to work the last stitch into the first stitch. And I will slip stitch join to the first. This completes round 5. Round 5 has 50 double crochets. For round 6, we're going to start with a chain 2. The repeat is 2 double crochets into 1 stitch, 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. So we're going to start with 1 double crochet into this first stitch. We'll work the second half of that one later. 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. Then we begin the repeat again, 2 double crochets into the next stitch, double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. We will continue working all the way around, 2 double crochets into the next stitch, 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. After we work the last stitch of our last increase. We'll work the very last stitch into the first stitch, and at the end of round 6 we will have 60 double crochets. Alright, there we are at the end of our repeat. I am going to work the very last stitch into that first stitch and slip stitch join to complete round 6, and round 6 has 60 double crochets. And again, I said, you know, if your hat poofs up, it's okay as long as it lays flat and your increases are okay. You just don't want it to be completely in that bowl shape. You want it to be getting larger and laying flat. When you wear it, you won't notice this slight puffiness that it has. The child, teen, and adult small size is all at the next one that we'll be working, which is going to be 70 double crochets. So to do that, we're going to chain 2. We'll work a double crochet into the first stitch, double crochet into each of the next 5 stitches. Then our repeat begins, 2 double crochets into the next stitch, double crochet into each of the next 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we continue working this way all the way around. 2 double crochets into the next stitch, double crochet into each of the next 5 stitches. Then after we finish our last repeat down here, we'll work the last stitch into the first one, slip stitch join, and we'll have 70 double crochets in this round. Worked my last repeat. Now I'm going to work the very last stitch into the first stitch, slip stitch join, and now this is the end of round 7. I have 70 double crochets. My diameter should be, let's see, 6 5/16 or around 6 3/8. This is going to fit a child, a teen, and adult small, which is typically the woman's size. This fits a head size of 21 to 22 inches in circumference. So we are done increasing now. We are no longer going to be increasing. Each time we worked another round, we increased. We went from 10 stitches to 20 stitches to 30 stitches to 40 stitches. Now you're not increasing anymore. So it's going to be 60 stitches in each round until you finish this hat. Now we're going to work round 8. And round 8 is just going to be just a plain row of double crochet. So we're going to chain 2. Here in the body, we have just finished the crown. In the crown, the chain 2 did not count as a stitch. In the body, we are going to count it as a stitch. So that is our very first stitch. We are not going to work a stitch into that one. We're going to work a stitch into the next stitch, which is the second stitch. So the chain 2 is coming out of this very first stitch. We're going to not work into that one, but double crochet into the next one. And continue double crocheting all the way around, counting this chain 2 as a stitch. Right now we have 3 stitches. We need 70 stitches. I've just worked my 70th stitch. I am going to insert my hook into the second chain. 1, 2, the second chain at the beginning, chain 2. Insert my hook, yarn over, and complete a slip stitch. That is round 8 finished, 70 double crochets. I'm going to switch my crochet hook. I've been using an H8 5mm crochet hook. Now I'm going to switch to a bigger crochet hook, an I9 5.5mm crochet hook. And the reason why I'm doing this is because the Suzette stitch pattern is much tighter because it's skipping a stitch and has single crochets in there. And it makes the fabric much tighter, so the overall beanie is tighter. And I wanted to fit more comfortable, more loosely, more stretchy. So I'm going up to this bigger hook size just for the Suzette stitch pattern. To begin, we're going to chain 1. We're going to single crochet into the first stitch, which is that chain that we slip stitched to. So we'll insert our hook into that stitch, yarn over, pull through. We have 2 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through both loops. Then we'll double crochet into the same stitch. And that is the Suzette stitch pattern. It is a single crochet and a double crochet into the same stitch, skip the next stitch. Then we single crochet and double crochet into the next stitch. Then we skip the next stitch. We single crochet into the next one, insert our hook, yarn over, pull through, 2 loops, yarn over, pull through both, and then double crochet into the next into the same stitch. So single crochet and double crochet into the same stitch, skip the next one. Single crochet, double crochet into the next stitch, skip the next one. You're going to continue working all the way around. When you get to the end, you're going to work your last cluster in this stitch over here, and you'll have this stitch left, 1 stitch left, and that's the one that you'll be skipping. Then we'll slip stitch join to the first stitch. Alright, I just worked my last cluster, and I have this stitch here that I'm skipping, so there is an empty stitch here, and then I will slip stitch join to the first stitch, which is a single crochet. Now I will chain 1 and turn. And in the crown we did not chain and turn, but in the Suzette stitch pattern we will be chaining 1 and turning at the end of every row, every round. When you look at these stitches, the shorter, smaller stitch is the single crochet, and the longer, taller stitch is the double crochet. We will always work the Suzette stitch pattern into the single crochets and skip the double crochets. The first stitch we're going to put into this stitch, this very first stitch that almost seems like it's behind us. That's where we're going to insert our hook and do our single crochet and our double crochet from our first cluster. And that's going to help keep our seam straight in our beanie by chaining 1 and turning, and by working into this first stitch. So we have our first cluster done. We're going to skip the next stitch, which is the double crochet, and we'll work our next cluster into the next stitch, which is a single crochet. Then we'll skip the next stitch and we'll work another cluster into the next stitch. And we're going to continue working the same way as we did before, single crochet and double crochet into one stitch, skip the next stitch, all the way around. And when you get to the end of this round, your last cluster will be here in this single crochet, and you will skip this double crochet just as you did before, skipping a stitch at the end, and slip stitch join to the beginning. Last cluster is finished. I have one stitch left, which I'll be skipping. Insert into the first stitch and slip stitch. And then we chain one and turn. And we repeat the same thing over and over again until we reach the length that we like. We'll be working into this first stitch that's sort of behind us, single crochet, then double crochet, skip the next stitch, which is a double crochet, and we'll single crochet and double crochet into the next stitch, which is a single crochet from the previous round. Skip the next stitch and work another cluster, and that's how you'll work all the way around. I am going to work off camera until I get to a length that I'm happy with. For a teen, adult, small woman's beanie, you're going to want, the average size is 8.5 inches long, starting from up here all the way down. I personally don't like my beanies to be quite that long. It's a little bit too much fabric for me, so I want to work until I'm around 8 inches long, and then I'll put a single crochet edge on the bottom so I can get a little over 8 inches. But if you want to work the average size that will cover the bottom of your ears, mine typically don't cover the bottom of my ears, but if you want a longer beanie, go with the average size, 8.5. Before you fasten off, just make sure you try it on so you can make sure it fits you the way that you'd like it to fit. But I'm going to work off camera until I get it to around 8 inches, measuring from the top down to the bottom. If you're going with the average size, you want to get to about 8.25 inches long, and then we'll put a final single crochet edge on it. I just finished row 24, and my beanie is currently measuring 8 inches long. I don't like my beanies to be too long. The extra fabric, I just don't like it. So I'm going to stop here after round 24 and add in another round of single crochet, and then I'm going to fasten off my beanie. The average length for a woman's size beanie for the adult small is 8.5 inches. So if you work 25 rounds, you'll be about 8 1/8 inches, and then add the additional round of single crochet and you'll be right there on the average of 8.5 inches. I'm doing mine 24 inches plus a single crochet so that my beanie's not as long. If you want to do yours the average size of 8.5 inches, do 25 rounds and then add the 26th round of single crochet. And you want the single crochet to be on the right side of the fabric. So at the end of my round 24, I'm turning to the right side to work. But if you work the additional round 25, then you'll want to do round 26 from the right side. Because this is row 24, row 25 would start here from the right side. Row 26 would technically be on the wrong side because you're turning, but we don't want to turn, we want to work from the right side. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to work the single crochet edging. It's single crochet into the first stitch and each stitch around. We've been working into this stitch behind us for our clusters, but for this round of single crochet I'm going to go ahead and just work into the first stitch that I see here, which is the double crochet stitch. It's one of the longer ones. And I'm keeping my I9 5.5 millimeter crochet hook for this part because single crochet can really limit the amount of stretch. And so it's recommended you do it loosely. Well, if you do it with the larger hook size, it's really a lot easier to keep that loose tension. So I'm just going to insert my hook into the first stitch, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through both loops. That's a single crochet. And I'm just single crocheting into each stitch all the way around. At the end of this round, I'm going to have 70 single crochets. There's my 70th single crochet. Now I'm just going to insert my hook into the first single crochet and slip stitch join. And now my beanie is finished. I just need to weave in my ends. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead, I'm just pulling up a big loop so I don't lose the stitch. I'm going to go ahead and try my beanie on just to make sure that it fits me the way that I want to before I fasten off. And then I'll come back, fasten off, and weave in my ends. Alright, I tried it on, fits great. I'm going to go ahead and fasten off my yarn now. Then I'm going to take that loop that I just finished, and I'm just going to pull it all the way so it breaks it. Insert my hook into the stitch that I joined to. Grab my yarn and pull it through to the back side. Then I'll turn my hat inside out. This is my top ring. I'm going to trim that because it's a little fluffy and uneven and it doesn't want to thread. Alright, so here's my center ring where I started. I'm going to weave my end in clockwise until I get back to the beginning. And now this is the beginning. And I'm just going to go a couple stitches over. And I'm pulling and it's tightening up this ring. Now I want to secure it by working my other passes. I work 3 passes in total, so that's 1 pass. I'm going to insert into a nearby stitch. I'm not going to pick the whole stitch up when I weave in my ends. So I'm not picking up the whole stitch when I work. I'm going to insert my hook down the center of the stitch, breaking it in half. And then I'll have my needle run across several stitches, and when I come out, I'm also going to break whatever stitch I'm coming out of in half. This is going to help catch my yarn. And I do that every single time. I never pick up a full stitch, I just go right down the center of it so it breaks it and it helps catch my yarn. There's 3 passes. If you're not comfortable, you think it's still loose, work another pass. I'll go down here to where I fastened off. And we don't want to work horizontally. That's going to limit the stretch of the beanie. We don't want that at all. We want it to fit comfortably. So we're going to work vertically. Just inserting in a nearby stitch. And work up several stitches. You can see here where I've broken my my stitch. Three passes and I'm comfortable with that. Feels secure. And this is where I had to join my new ball of yarn. So when I weave these in, I'm also going to do it vertically because horizontal will prohibit the stretch. We don't want to do that. I'm going to turn my beanie to the right side and it's ready to wear. Find the written pattern for this beanie in several sizes at iloveknots.com. Please smash that like button and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.